Good evening. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Mike Looney. I'm the Superintendent of Schools. To give you a little bit of context, this topic of school safety is not new to our district. It's not new to our district because when I first joined the school system in December of 2009, one of the first things I did is look through the various plans that this school district had across all areas of operations, safety being one of those. Shortly thereafter, Sandy Hook happened. And so obviously that heightened our sense of awareness tremendously across the entire nation. We convened here in Williamson County a statewide meeting. We hosted the meeting at the factory. We pulled together experts from across the nation, and we invited school districts from across the state of Tennessee to join us in a collaborative day where we met with experts on school security. We reviewed safety plans, and we tried to reinforce the things that we knew were best practices at the time. In addition to that, our school board authorized me to hire a nationally recognized school safety expert, Michael Dorn, to come in and complete a thorough audit of our school district from a safety perspective. Part of that audit was to walk through school buildings, to find soft targets, to find hazards, and to review our school safety plans to determine where they needed to be shored up in relationship to what best practices were. Along about that same time, we invested a substantial amount of money in developing a communication system for all schools as a backup when power went out. And so we now have, actually in my first year of being in the district, we installed a radio system that works without traditional power. There's battery backup so that every school can communicate directly with central office, with 911, and with law enforcement and first responders. That is in location in every school. And we practice the utilization of that communication system across the district on a regular basis. After Mr. Dorn and the safety audit was completed, one of the recommendations from that audit was to hire the first ever school security director for our school district. We hadn't had one of those before, quite frankly, because we didn't think there was a need for it. The school board authorized that expenditure. It was supported by the county commission, and we were able to hire Mike Fletcher, and Mike has been with us ever since that time. Mike's job is to work directly with schools in the development and the training of their school safety plans, and to serve as a liaison between first responders that serve the various parts of our community. It's law enforcement, EMA, fire, the whole 9 yards. In addition to that, Sheriff Long, who is an invaluable partner with our school district and the county commission, primarily first through the partnership that I had with Sheriff Long, he committed to trying to locate SROs, to put a SRO, a school resource officer, in every one of our school buildings. The county commission, after the school board voted, quickly agreed to do that, and within 12 months of Sandy Hook, we had located and placed a school resource officer in every one of our buildings in the district, and that hadn't been the case before. Most recently, after the tragedy in Florida, the sheriff, on his own volition, honestly, went to the county commission. Obviously, I was pleased with this, but asked for additional SROs to serve our largest high schools. So beginning immediately, as soon as they can hire and train school resource officers, every one of our high schools with more than 1,500 students will have a second school resource officer. In addition to that, the sheriff has received funding to hire 3, for the lack of a better word, replacement SROs or substitute SROs, because as with anything else, sometimes school resource officers get sick or have to go to training, and there's nobody to take their place when they're absent from the building. So moving forward, we will have 3 roaming SROs in the district, courtesy of Sheriff Long and the county commission, to backfill when an SRO is not in the building. it's critical that you know that that SROs are actual law enforcement officers. Not only do they possess the training to deal with intruders and school emergencies, but they have full law enforcement powers, which include arresting powers. So they are not Williamson County Schools employees. They are employees of the Sheriff's Department. They are law enforcement officers. They work in conjunction with school administrators, but they don't work for school administrators, and that's an important distinction. After the Florida tragedy, we also decided to go back because our district continues to grow in students and in campuses. I requested, and the school board very, very readily and quickly, proactively, said yes to hiring a second Director of Safety and Security to work with Mr. Fletcher so that we could have more coverage across the school system in training and inspecting plans and working with as a liaison for the schools and law enforcement and first responding agencies. So that's something, and I believe Mr. Fletcher has finished his interview processes and is ready to hire, I suppose, this week. So that's going to be an immediate change. The next thing that we've done already since the Florida tragedy is I went to the school board as a result of consulting with experts and even our local folks and asked them to allow me to spend $100,000 on upgrading our phone system for the purpose of being able to respond better in the case of emergency. And so I want to let you know how the system worked in the past, but I also want you to know how it's going to work moving forward so that you can see the distinction between where we were and where we're going to be. In the past, just as with your home, when you dial 911 from any of the hundreds of phones in the school building, it simply gave the physical address to where the school was. So if 911 received a call from Franklin High School, it would simply give the physical address of Franklin High School, and that would be it. Well, for a home and a business, that might work very well. But for a building that's almost 300,000 square feet with hundreds of individual rooms and 2 floors, that doesn't give very specific information to the first responders. This new system is entirely different, and what it allows us to do is to give very specific information to law enforcement and first responders in the case of emergency. As an example, if I was at Ravenwood High School and I was in the D wing in room 220, the 911 call would specifically point out the call is coming from 220, the D wing, which is on the 2nd floor of the school. That allows law enforcement and first responders quicker response time to identify exactly where the call is coming from and therefore respond appropriately. Another improvement in the system that we're implementing as a result of the school board and the county commission's approval and funding of $100,000 is we now are able to call 911 from multiple locations on the same campus in the same facility. The former system that we had, only one 911 call could be made from one facility. So if there were 2 separate incidents in a school, the line would be clogged up because only one call could go through at a time. That will no longer be the case. From this point forward, we will have multiple 911 calls, and once again, we will be able to give specific information about the very specific location the call is coming from. What we know about the school shootings that we have been witnessing across the nation is time is critical to survival. And the quicker we can get law enforcement on the scene, the quicker the response time is, the more lives that we save in the process. So I'm really excited about the upgrade in the phone system. I'm really excited about adding an additional person at the district office to work in the field, working with law enforcement and school officials, vetting the plans that we have. I know that you already know this because you had to adjust your lives to my request, and that is once the last tragedy happened, we convened all employees into one location, and we reviewed their site-specific safety plans to make sure that everybody knows exactly what to do. One of those, when I was in the Marines, I learned train, train, train. So it was an opportunity for us to get the plans back out and retrain and reinforce, and making sure that we had all of our I's dotted and all of our T's crossed as it relates to the individual safety plans in our schools. Now, I will tell you, it's a challenge for us because we have 6,500 plus employees, and making sure that all employees are on the same page at any given point in time is a tremendous challenge. So we are committed from this point forward to in fact, I have directed from this point forward at every staff meeting that we have, that school safety be a standing agenda item where we're constantly reviewing the safety plans that we have in place. So we're doing a lot of things in the near term from this point forward to the end of the year that will hopefully, one, make your students feel safer and more secure, but two, will increase our capacity to respond in the case of an emergency. Now, having said that, I must tell you that school shootings is just one type of emergency that we plan for. And so it's not just about school safety or shootings, but it is also about hazardous waste. It is also about bullying. It's also about cyberbullying and threats that don't have, when students making threats where they don't have the ability to carry them out. It's about fire drills and tornado drills and earthquake drills and all the other things that come with the school business. So they're focusing intently on all of those things. In addition to those items, those kind of short-term goals, we also have some long-term ideas and strategies that we're going to implement, and Mr. Fletcher is going to spend some time kind of discussing those. But I want to talk about two additional things before I turn this mic over to law enforcement so they can talk to you about the partnership that we have. And these are two real critical components, and then I'm going to ask you for your help. So the first component that I'm going to talk about is social media. What we know from the school shootings and the acts of violence that have occurred in our country is most often, if not all the time, I can't say that with certainty, but I can certainly say most often, the student or the person that committed the act of violence had stated that of their intention somewhere, typically on social media. And so other people had at least the opportunity to know of the threat or the possibility of the threat. So one of the things that we're doing with law enforcement is we are implementing a strategy where we're monitoring social media use around a school. So as an example, if someone said the word shooting Franklin High School, we actually technically have a way to monitor that and to turn that over to the appropriate agencies. And so we're working on that strategy to make sure that we are working on monitoring social media activity and traffic so that we can identify potential threats, which is really, really a big development in our school community because people use social media to broadcast what their intentions are. And so I want you to know that. And I've gone completely blank on my second task or the statement, so I'm gonna skip that. I apologize, my brain is fried a little bit. And so I'm gonna go to my request of you. One of the things that I talked to our employees about on that Monday when your children were outside playing in the nice weather was the importance of us working collectively to ensure the safety of our students. And I can't articulate to you enough how important a role you play, ladies and gentlemen. You have to monitor your students' use of social media. You have to know what they're saying. I can't, if you just went to my Twitter feed today, just today, and you looked at some of the comments that students have made on social media today, the language that they use, the statements that they make, it's absolutely incredible. And I can't help, and I'm not casting stones. I have 4 children of my own, and they make mistakes, but they needed my discipline and they needed my supervision. We have to work collectively to monitor what our students are doing on social media because they think that you're not watching. And oftentimes we're not watching as grown-ups. And I tell my employees this: if you see something, say something. I promise you, as a school district, we're committed to trying to build professional relationships with students so that we know if something is amiss. We should know if their dog died, or if their parents are getting a divorce and it's a rough divorce, or if they're homeless. We should know those things because we're building professional relationships with students. But you are a central figure in making sure not only that your children are safe, but that all other children are safe in our school community. So I'm imploring you, if you're not good at social media, we'll train you on how to monitor social media. If your child has a social media account, please, please, please follow them and know what they're doing. Because oftentimes we can prevent an event from happening. This might be a shock to you, but I want you to hear this. The sheriff's office, along with our school district, has prevented school shootings in Williamson County. We have found threats, legitimate threats, and acted on them because we worked in partnership. And here in Williamson County. So don't think that this is a Florida problem. This is a Williamson County challenge, and we have to work together to solve it, and we can't do it from one side. We have to be partners. If you see something, you have to say something. And it's not just about your child, it's about the neighbor's child. When you see it on Twitter or on Facebook or on Snapchat, and you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said that. You can't let it go there. You've got to report it. These gentlemen are going to give you hotlines and tip lines and email addresses to report. You don't have to give your name, but we have to know in order to be able to do something. And if you don't get feedback, then push us, call me, tell us that, hey, something happened, we dropped the ball, nobody told me something has happened. We have to work together to do our very best to prevent a future tragedy right here in Williamson County. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we have been close. We've been close. We've been lucky. We've been close. And none of us want that kind of tragedy to happen. If you see something, say something. You have to monitor your child's social media. The last thing I want to say, it came back to me. My age is getting to me. We have developed a process where we're going to begin to track and intervene with students that have risky behaviors. So if little Johnny is aggressive at school and is bullying on the playground and has a social media account where it shows that he's killing dogs, guess what? He's going to be put into our network where we're reporting and monitoring that child. Now, that child has rights that we can't circumvent, that we can't go beyond, but we are going to identify and track the students that we think are of high risk of hurting themselves or others. And our school board has insisted that our budget includes additional resources such as social workers, such as contracts with psychologists and psychiatrists and other entities that help families and students in crisis. We're doing all those things. We have a great relationship with the juvenile court system. We're prepared to do everything within our power to make sure that your children are safe and our staff members are safe. But ladies and gentlemen, we all have to be vigilant and on top of it. And just as when you go to the airport, when you're looking around for an unleft book bag because you're afraid there's going to be a bomb, I do it, and I know you do it. With that same vigilance, we have to be monitoring social media. We have to be cognizant of what our children are saying on social media, and we have to listen to what their friends are saying. We cannot put our heads in the sand and hope it's going to be okay, because it may not be. And almost invariably, all of the tragedies that we've seen happen, unfold in our country, almost all of them could have been prevented if somebody had just said something. I'm not scolding you or criticizing you. I'm pleading for your help. With that being said, I want to introduce our very capable law enforcement agency, the Sheriff's Office. And Sheriff Long could not be here tonight, but he has his very capable assistant here. And so I actually don't know what your official title is. I think Captain. I'm sorry. I was in the Marine Corps. I'm going to call you Colonel. So thank you so much for being here, Captain. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. Looney. I appreciate it. The sheriff does send his regrets not being able to be here tonight with you, but he sent me instead, so you'll have to just put up with that for just a few minutes. We are very much committed to working in conjunction with the school system to make sure that your children are safe. We had the issue down in Florida recently, and I don't know about Dr. Looney, I don't know about Mike, Jason up here. I had some sleepless nights over the last 2 or 3 weeks. It is my responsibility as the captain of the division, of all the people that are in these schools, they're my responsibility, but it's also my responsibility to make sure that your children are safe. And those sleepless nights were because I was going over in my head, are we doing enough? Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing what we should? Do we need to do more? And of course, we all got together and tried to make sure. We all put our heads together and said, hey, what more can we do? Is there something else that we're not doing that we should be doing? We started talking about it, and we started checking over things and second-guessing things and all that. It is our responsibility to make sure that your children have a safe learning environment, and we want to make sure we do that. Dr. Looney alluded earlier to 2012, which was the Sandy Hook shooting. We hired 32 SROs at that point, all at once, to get them into the elementary schools, to make sure that we weren't just, before I think in 1998 we started with the high schools, then we added the middle schools, and then it took Sandy Hook, I guess, to kind of wake us up enough to go, okay, maybe we should have an SRO in every school. It's sad that it takes some of these things happening to kind of shake us a little bit and decide, okay, there's something else more we can do. But the county commission, and believe me, we are very fortunate to be in Williamson County. I can tell you that tonight. Because the county commission come together just recently, and like he said, approved 8 more positions. We're going to have more in the high schools. We're going to have SROs, supervisors that rove that we can fill in. We want to make sure that there's somebody there that protects your children, that protects the staff that works in those schools. It's our responsibility. We also want to stress, and just like Dr. Looney said, we want to talk about the see something, say something. Let me take that just a little bit further. If you hear something, say something, okay? We do talk about social media a lot. Social media is, in my own personal, humble opinion, the scourge of the earth right at this moment. Social media has changed our world. How many believe that? We are in church. Just raise your hand. Amen. Social media has changed us. We're different than we were a few years back. When I was growing up in high school, most of the pickup trucks had a gun rack on the back window and had a shotgun or a rifle on that back window. Can you do that today? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous of a thing to do. And we want to make sure that any information that is out there that could help us head off something, prevent something from happening here in Williamson County Schools, that's what we want to do. And we can't do it. Like Dr. Looney said, we cannot do that by ourselves. The sheriff's office can't do it. The school system can't do it by ourselves. We depend on you to help us out with that. Please check that social media. Please be aware. Say something if you hear something. Say something if you see something. We want to stress that because we need that help. We have a new tip line, or it's really not a tip line, it's a tip that you can text in a tip. text in some information to the sheriff's office. It's called Tip 411. All you have to do is look up on the App Store, and you can get the app put on your phone, Tip 411, and you can text this tip into us, and it is strictly anonymous, totally anonymous. We're not going to find out who it is. We don't care who it is that's sending us that information. We just want the information to be able to hopefully stop something from happening in our schools, okay? A little bit more about the history of the SRO division. We currently have 60 employees. Williamson County, we have 45 schools. We have one in each of the 45 schools. We have one in the Franklin High School Annex now, or an SRO. Of course, we do 8 Franklin Special School District schools. And then this year, this fall, we will open 3 additional schools, the Thompson Station schools and then Split Log, Jordan Elementary. We will have SROs in those 3 schools. The district is growing, but the county commission has dedicated to grow with that system, and each time we open a school to put an SRO there, we want to make sure that they're safe. We want the children to be able to learn. We want them to be able to feel safe. We want you to feel comfortable that when you drop your child off at the school, the front of the school, that child is going to be smiling and happy to see you at the end of the school day, and nothing happened in between except being educated. One more time, see something, say something. And I'll turn it over to Fletcher.
Thank you, Captain. So, could we just take a second? Captain Wainwright's such a great partner with us and all of his SROs in the buildings every day, standing tall to keep our kids safe. Could we just give him a round of applause real quick? One of the great things about the job that I have is I get to work with a lot of different entities, a lot of great people. I work for folks from the federal level, with federal agencies, at the state level, and certainly at a local level in all our emergency services here in Williamson County. But I'll tell you, one of the most important partners that I have is engaged parents in students' lives. So I appreciate every one of you being here tonight. So let's talk about kind of the mindset of what we do and how we protect these students. First, we use an all-hazards approach, and Dr. Looney spoke to that a little bit. We can't just focus on one particular hazard. We've got to consider all of them. You know, in the past several weeks, we've seen a lot on the news about school shootings and violence in our schools. And it's certainly a threat to us, and we've paid close attention to it. But, you know, last night in northern Alabama, we had a threat come through that's very real to us here as well, and that's severe weather, tornadoes, things of that sort. So we spend a lot of time working with our emergency management partners and the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency on determining what all our threats and hazards are, and we list those out. And our plans at each and every school are designed to respond to all of those threats that are pertinent to us here in Williamson County. So, like Dr. Looney alluded to, we made some improvements, changes, reminders to our plans back several weeks ago. It was a good opportunity for us as a district to take a breath, push pause, and revisit all these things to make sure that we were doing everything that we could to keep our students safe. You've seen those procedural changes if you've been to our buildings. When you go in, the checking of the IDs, it's probably been a little inconvenient, I would imagine. But here's the deal. If we're going to be safe and secure, we're probably going to be inconvenient, because I don't know how you can have it both ways. I certainly know our staff has had to be inconvenienced because we've talked about not keeping doors unlocked, not propping doors open, maintaining locked classroom doors throughout the day. Let's be honest, that's inconvenient, but it's what we've got to do to keep our students safe. It takes a little bit longer for us to plan how we've got to unload some boxes from the cars or bring in some packages from outside, but it's what we've got to do. We've got to get that human being there to hold that door for us so that it's not unlocked and not propped open, because we all know how busy life is, and it only takes a second before we forget and walk away from that door. The procedural changes, it's important for you to go through. And I know a lot of you think, I've been to that school 1,000 times. I'm there twice a day. They know me. Then I'd ask you this. Be a good example for those that aren't. Show that ID and present yourself according to our procedures, and we certainly appreciate that. One of the things we've done, we've asked our administrators and our SROs to do, is increase the patrols to the exterior of the campus, to look around outside, especially in our vulnerable areas. When we've got external classrooms, buildings, annexes, portable classrooms, we want an increased presence in those areas. And our law enforcement partners throughout Williamson County have also aided us in spending more time on our campuses, just being there. If an officer needs to write a report, we'd welcome them gladly on our campus to pull up and do that report sitting in their car, because more law enforcement present on our campuses is a deterrent. Last night, asked our school board and informed them about some things that we may be coming to them in the future for capital requests. And I'll just run down some of these things. One particular example is security landscaping. What does that even mean? The technical term for it is crime prevention through environmental design. It's not a complicated process. Really what it means is our campus is set up to not provide areas of refuge for people to conduct illicit activities, cause crime, vandalism, to access up to our school buildings without being seen. We're going to look at those campuses and we're going to figure out if we've got trees and bushes in the wrong place. We're all about beauty, but we are definitely about safety and security. So we may be removing some of that stuff to make sure that we've got as secure schools on the outside as possible. We're looking at a visitor management system. A system that provides us a screening process for people coming into our buildings, that allows certain types of badges to be printed out. It will help us with our access control. It documents who's in the building. While we want to know who's in the building for security reasons, there's also safety reasons. Should one of our buildings be impacted significantly by severe weather, when emergency services arrives to perform rescues, we need to know who's in that building. We want to make sure that we get everyone out. We think a visitor management system could help strengthen both safety and security. We're looking at taking that communication system that Dr. Looney talked about and potentially upgrading that. We've got a great opportunity to do that. The county has been looking at going to a much stronger, more capable communication system in the future, and we'd like to be a part of that as well. It certainly decreases some dead spots that we have in our county with our buses. Let me tell you how good it can be. There's a few spots in our county where we lose communication with our buses for a short period of time. They're the deep hollers and valleys that we have in Williamson County. This communication system wouldn't take it all the way to 100%, because I'm not sure there's a communication system that'll do 100%, but it will certainly take us to about 99% in our county. But it will also provide us the opportunity to be in direct communication with those buses should they go on a field trip to Chattanooga, Knoxville. When the state finishes the base of this system out, we would be able to talk to our buses whether they were in Memphis or Kingsport, Tennessee. We can also utilize that communication system in our school buildings. And one of the greatest benefits is it also ties directly into our emergency service responders in the county. So we'd have direct communication from our administrators in the building to the folks that are coming to provide them help. We're looking at options for a staff panic notification system, a way that each staff member can provide an alert out to alert everyone in the school to a particular situation, as well as call for emergency services in that event simultaneously. There's a lot of systems out there, and the big thing about it is, I will tell you from studying it a lot, there's a lot of companies. We want to figure out what product is best, what product will serve us best, and that takes time. The technology is certainly out there, and there's a lot of them, we want to make sure we get the right one. And then we're also looking at our access control throughout our district. You've seen them at our front doors. We've got several phases of that where we'll start to secure up the inside of the buildings. Remember, we want to make sure that we only allow access to the students to those that we choose to get access to our students. We feel like that's an important piece of keeping danger away from our students. Let me go back to the severe weather for a minute. We've been working for this past year, and I hope that we can very soon provide some more information, but we've been working with the National Weather Service. We have a great relationship directly with the National Weather Service, and we've worked through a process with them to ensure that all of our schools meet the standards that the National Weather Service sets for a school district to be storm ready. And I just think that's important for you to know as we come up on a much stormier season, that we have made it a concerted effort to make sure that we're prepared for those events as well. The biggest thing that I can tell you is this: it's not a single person or a single entity that has the total responsibility for the students in our buildings. It has got to be each and every single one of us, knowing that it is vitally important to maintain that safe and secure environment for those students to get that education, to be provided that learning from our teachers. It's not just my responsibility, it's all of ours. We've got to all come together and make this a priority to continue this on down the road. To always be vigilant, to always be paying attention, and to always be progressing forward in our safety and security posture throughout the district. And at any point in time along the way, if we find ourselves not in that place, just like we've been talking about all night, if you see something, you've got to say something. Make people aware. Ms. Birdsong?
So we're gonna get into the question and answer session. As she's setting up, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. But I want to make a couple of closing comments before we get to questions. We have plans. We have had plans. We will continue to have plans. We will continue to update and refresh our plans. Our plans include contingencies for every possibility. No plan is perfect. We do not share our plans. I don't share the plans with school board members. I don't share the plans with parents, and I don't share the plans with students. Here's why. If I share the plan, other people know the plan, it creates additional risk. The one thing that I ask you to communicate to your children is this: listen to the teachers and the administrators in the building. They're the only ones that know the plan. That's purposeful. I don't get why people share plans broadly, because it enhances risk. We have reunification plans, we have alternate locations, we have evacuation sites, we have pre-stage supports, we have plans, we have comprehensive plans. We have had these plans. No plan is perfect, but we have plans. The one thing that your student needs to know is listen to the adults, because the plan is always going to be changing. If we practice going out the same door at every fire drill, it just may be that that door is blockaded. If we practice doing an evacuation drill a certain way, then it may be that that enhances our risks. So the best thing they can do is to pay attention and listen to the adults. If you do that, your children will be more safe. And you are an active participant in our safety plan. If you're a visitor in our building and you see somebody without a visitor badge, see something, say something. If you see an employee not wearing an employee badge, see something, say something. If you see a door propped open, see something, say something. Unprop it. We need your help. Together, we can make this a safer place. It's already safe, but we can make it safer. Mrs. Birdsong.
First question here. Would you stand up, please? What is your question?
Well, I'm not one who typically comes out for these types of meetings, but I felt passionate about this, so I'm a little bit nervous about it. When the shooting happened at Parkland, I was so inspired by those kids finally standing up and demanding change. It's their world, it's their kids' world now. And I know that we joke about they're the Tide Pod eating generation. I don't believe that. With that said, I was also very proud of my son, who's in middle school, who said, "Mom, I want to do the walkout. I want to have a voice." There was a negative connotation to those kids walking out instead of walking up to somebody. With all of that said, what voice are we giving our kids in Williamson County Schools? This is their world now, and it's going to be their kids' world, and they want to feel safe. What tools are we giving them to have a voice without a negative connotation? If they want to walk out, walk out. That's their chance to have a voice. So I challenge you to make me feel more comfortable that my two boys have a voice on feeling safe in Williamson County Schools. And if they see something to say something, they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe doing that right now. There's been numerous times I've had my son say something. He's like, "Mom, I'm going to get beaten up, so I'm not going to say anything." So where's their voice in all of this? Because I haven't heard it tonight at all.
So thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to have an additional conversation with you privately where I can identify the location and that sort of thing. As it relates to the walkout, just as you have your perspective, I will tell you I've got thousands of emails from people on both perspectives, on both sides of that issue. What my goal was is to allow it to happen, to provide as much safety as possible, and create as little disruption as possible. And to be honest with you, on the whole, we had a couple thousand students participate, and we had, I think, 5 student discipline issues where they didn't obey the rules relating to student safety, like walking off campus and that sort of thing. So we tried to respect their First Amendment rights while maintaining some control in the district. Whether we did it perfectly or not is up for debate. I would say that any time that you have civil disobedience, it's hard to be perfect. But I will tell you, our employees were informed not to prevent students from walking out if they wanted to, but to follow certain procedures to maximize their safety. As it relates to your son's voice, I will tell you, I have encouraged, and I know all of our staff members have encouraged our students to talk to their teachers, to talk to their counselors, to talk to their administrators, and then finally, your child or most of our students probably have access to me as well directly. So if that chain of command doesn't work, then for goodness sake, reach out to me too. So we stand ready to partner with students, but at the same time, I want to make sure that our students are not taken advantage of by outside groups as well that have some political leanings, left or right, that could take advantage of this heightened awareness and concern. So we try to find balance, and that's probably dancing around your specific question, but I'll be glad to talk to you privately.
Dr. Looney, I'm not sure this is working or not. Test. Dr. Looney, this may not be directly on point, but I wanted to add this. When we have discipline hearings with our students, one of the questions we regularly ask them is, do you have somebody in the school building that you trust? Many of our student discipline issues are related to them making a mistake as a young person when it might have been more wise to get some help from an adult. And we often ask that question, who in the building? We actually had one earlier today where that particular student named 3 adults in the building. That was gratifying, but I will tell you, sometimes they say nobody. And that's something that we're working on right now to make sure that every student at least knows somebody, an adult, that they can trust to talk to if an issue comes up. Not directly on point, but I felt like it was worth sharing that.
And then I know Captain Wainwright said this earlier, there is a new app that's free and anonymous. It's called, Captain? Tip 411. So any person can make an anonymous tip to tip 411. It doesn't come to the school district. It goes to law enforcement, who will then direct communication to us. So tip 411.
We also have an anti-bullying hotline that scrolls on the front page of our website. I don't know how many of you noticed. It's always in the scroll. And that's 855-284-0669. It can be found on our website on the scroll.
Can you repeat the bullying hotline one more time?
Sure. 2840669.
And then finally, I will add this. Many of you may or may not know this, but I actually meet with students every month. I have a student advisory committee or council, 3 students from each high school that meet with me that address issues of concern from students. I recognize that that does not include middle school and elementary school students. That's primarily because of transportation issues. But I will say that that group of students representing their peer students across schools are not shy in telling me about issues of concern to them. Ms. Birdsong?
Rebecca.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hi. So I have 2 questions that I would like for you guys to address. The first, you talked about IDs, and I think that's great, but I'm not sure how effective that is. And I would like for you to kind of address when you're looking at IDs, like for me, I have my ID in my work badge, and I show it to pick up my kids at the SAC program through a tinted window. They can't really see my ID, and I don't even know what they're looking for. Even if they get a good look of my ID, how do they know that I'm allowed to be in the school? Like, what does that tell them? All that tells them is my address and that I'm a organ donor, but they don't really get to see if I have a criminal background or anything like that. And the second thing I'd like for you guys to address, my kids go to Oakview Elementary, and my daughter is in a portable all day, and it's not fenced. When I go through the secure front desk and I show them my ID and I get my sticker, I walk through the school, out the door that's now locked, to my daughter's portable that is not contained by a fence or any other secure system. I could have easily just parked near her portable, gotten a couple extra stickers, and walked directly to her classroom, and no one would have known how I got there. Can we address like the outdoor facility as well?
So I'll address both of those questions, and then Ms. Golden, you can chime in, Fletch kid as well. So the first question about ID badges, you're absolutely right. As far as employees go, we have a designated badge that's official and has color codes that everybody knows. As it relates to visitors, every school has a different methodology for their visitor badge. We actually are looking at purchasing a system of it's about $1.5 million, where it would you basically would submit your driver's license to the front office, and they would do an instant background check to see if you have a criminal activity or a warrant or you're a pedophile or any of those kinds of things. So we are weighing whether or not that's a purchase that we want to make. I will tell you though, while I think that might catch some bad actors, I don't know that those bad actors would necessarily have ill intent in the school. Most school shooters aren't going to run to the office and check in. They're going to bypass the front office. And so, we have to kind of weigh that whether that's a good use of $1.5 million or not, or is there another way to use that $1.5 million in a more effective way. As it relates to portables, we too have concerns about portables. Having said that though, that is true of all of our campuses at any point in time of day. We will always have students on the exterior of the main building, whether they're at PE, on the playground, or going from one location to another, or going from their car into the building or out, or getting on the buses. We will always have those situations where students are in a more exposed location. Having said that, we have worked with schools that have portables to redo their lock system in the portables to make the lock system more secure, and it allows them to barricade the door from keeping entry into the building easily. And then finally, we have worked with the Sheriff's Department to make sure, and the administration of the building, to make sure that we are fully cognizant of the additional exposure that we have when students are outside on the playground or during transition times, or even portables that at least from a perception standpoint have more exposure. As it relates to the fence, I want to address specifically the Oakview, because I went out there at the request of Mrs. Garrett and Dan Cash the other day to kind of observe the concern about fencing. As a retired Marine, I think I bring a different perspective. If you fence an area in, what you really are doing is creating a shooting gallery because there's nowhere for the kids to run. They're fenced in. So I would argue that fencing in an area is actually more dangerous than not fencing in. Now, will it keep out an intruder? No, because they'll jump the fence. It's a 4-foot fence. Will it stop bullets? No, but what it would do is prevent little kids because they can't hop the fence. So they would be in a captured area without a way to flee. And so what we know is one of the new strategies that has been taught to school districts is to teach the skill of fleeing quickly. And so I have concerns about fencing in particular, and so I think there's probably every situation is a little bit different. Mike or Captain Wainwright or Jason, you might want to add some of that.
And one of the things we are doing is doing a campus-by-campus evaluation. In Oakview's example, if you think about the fencing, there is some fencing on that far west side that goes along the road and then angles up the driveway and stops basically where the gate closes on a daily basis. We have evaluated that. Ultimately, Dr. Looney's right. For most of our fencing situations, we're concerned about the evacuation process if we have a narrow gated fence spot. But we are evaluating each of those on an individual basis because we do believe there is some wisdom in creating some fencing to prevent ease of crossing over as long as there is still a reasonable evacuation. We're probably going to add a little bit here and there to particular campuses, mainly at the exposed areas on the front, as long as we still have reasonable evacuation areas from those facilities. Now, I will say also, Dr. Looney and Captain Wainwright can talk to this, we've placed a re-emphasis for our administrators and our SROs to make sure they're visible not just inside the building but outside. Because Dr. Looney made an excellent point. Every one of our buildings has students in and out of the school on a daily basis, not just at the elementaries, not just with portables. We have outbuildings in many of our high schools. Some of our CTE programs, students are going back and forth, PE classes, recess, etc.
That is also part of the SRO's job, is to make sure that they do outside rounds, to check out around those buildings in the back and in the front, just to make sure that they're not seeing anybody that's on that property that should not be there.
And one other thing that makes it difficult to do my job sometimes is, for security issues, we are not relieved of the burden of fire code as well. We still have to comply with fire code. And a lot of things that you could do to make things more secure violate fire code directly. And so we constantly have to balance that. We have to get with the state fire marshal and work through a lot of these issues because we could very easily do something that violates that code, and then they're going to come out and inspect us, and we're going to have an issue. So when we enclose an area with fencing, we still have to have an outlet for those students and staff to leave that particular area, which comes in the form of panic out devices, just like you see on a lot of the doors in this facility. You just simply press and go. If you have those, they're also incredibly easy to defeat. So we're not necessarily creating a truly secure perimeter so much as we're putting up something that hopefully people in good standing would simply abide by. But we know that bad actors are not going to abide by that. They're going to defeat those systems. And so it becomes definitely a challenge when you bring fire code into play.
This way.
Apparently there was another incident today in Maryland, and if you contrast that with what happened in Parkland, in Parkland allegedly there was SROs that didn't engage the perpetrator, and in Maryland it apparently looks like they did engage. What assurances do we have from the Sheriff's Department and from the school district that our SROs have more of the Maryland mentality and less of the Florida mentality when it comes to engaging potential intruders?
Thank you for that question. I appreciate that. Our SROs train on a continual basis. Every time that there's breaks in the school year and during the summer, our SROs are training to make sure that if something does occur, they fall back on their training to be able to take action when action needs to be taken. If you fail to train and if you do not train enough for an active, and we actually, it's It sounds worse, but we call it what it is. It's an active killer situation instead of an active shooter. We train to go directly to that active killer and to neutralize the threat, to stop the threat from any more killing, okay? And so each and every time we train, we instill that within our SROs to make sure that they take that action. We cannot guarantee that. Each person has their own mental capabilities, but we do feel like because of the additional training and the continual training that they will fall back on their training to take that action.
And I'd just like to say, too, the Sheriff's Department puts in an immense amount of training to respond to these type of events. And I'd also like to say that all the other law enforcement agencies in this county do as well. They request time in our buildings so that they can come in and get that training in that environment. And so it's not just the Sheriff's Department, but all the law enforcement agencies that are going to respond to these events. And I'm very impressed with the high level of training that they put in for this. In my opinion, they are ready to respond.
I wanted to add one little tiny additional piece of that I don't think was mentioned. The Sheriff's Department has added a number of sergeants who are going to be filling in at spots for sick leave, those kinds of things, to make sure that we're fully staffed as well at all of our schools on a daily basis.
Rebecca has someone.
I guess you just answered my question about the SROs. I still kind of wonder, with an SRO, if they're 100% prepared for that. I don't think they go to school every day thinking that bullets are going to fly. But even if the SRO is prepared, the schools are large and there's only one in the building, and there can be a lot of damage by the time they run across the building and try to find the spot.
Sir, I can't hear what you're saying. Can you speak up?
So if they, even if the SRO is prepared to go into the room, and they're in that mindset, even if they have to run across the building, by the time they get across the building, there could be a lot of lives lost already, right? So I've discussed with a lot of people thinking, I know it's a big argument whether the teacher should or should not have guns, should or not carry. I thought, why don't we let the teachers decide whether they do or don't, and let the parents decide whether their kids are in a classroom that has a teacher with a gun. Then also, about the buzz-in, having to buzz in to get in and out of school, I used to work for another school, and I was talking to the superintendent right after this last shooting. Basically, his thing is that you have to buzz in and get in and out of the school. Well, I asked the question, what about the start and the end of the days? When you got thousands of kids going in and out of the school, how are you stopping it at that point? And he basically said at that point, that is a loophole. That's not really a good answer for me. So, and also too, when I worked at that school, I was an IT person. I did design a system. I don't know if you guys have it. I know you have a saying where you call 911 and they know what room's calling. I did design a system for them to where they have a security system, so if they call 911, the 911 dispatcher will actually have video able to see the rooms, all the rooms from their location, and be able to talk back to the police officer and tell them what's going on.
So I wasn't able to make out all of your comments and questions, but I caught a couple of them. First, as it relates to arming teachers and allowing teachers the decision, there are 3 bills in the legislature right now addressing that issue. So quite frankly, it's a legislative issue to start with. As I understand it, all of the bills would be permissive legislation that would allow local school districts to make up their mind. As the superintendent of schools, I am diametrically opposed to arming teachers. But I owe you an explanation. I'll tell you why I hold my position. First of all, we have SROs in our school buildings that are trained, professional law enforcement officers. I'm a retired Marine. I know a lot about weapons. I also know this, that if I didn't practice with my weapon, and I didn't practice in situations that required my blood pressure and my pulse rate to go up dramatically and shoot at moving objects without harming others through friendly fire, where other people were trying to hurt me, it's not the same. Having a pistol permit is not anywhere adequate to being able to look another human being in the eye and pulling a trigger and minimizing the risk to others. So I will tell you, nothing against teachers at all. I don't think that we're equipped to provide the training necessary to have teachers prepared to do that. And I understand that people have differing views on that issue. That just happens to be my view. I don't know where our school board lines up on that issue, because we haven't had to weigh in on it, because right now in our state it's not permissible, but I suspect by the end of this legislative session it will be permissible for some. And then quite frankly, just putting it bluntly, if arming teachers was a possibility, I have no reason to believe that because we live in a community where the dollar is so important, we would end up defunding SROs, saying that we had teachers there to do what the SROs are already there to do. And I think that would be a travesty. The other issue was about the sign-in system, I think, and I wasn't really sure what you were saying about the sign-in, but I will say this. I recognize full good and well that any sign-in system is a flawed system, because we are expecting people to obey the rules to get into the building, and bad actors aren't going to obey the rules to start with. Now, having said that, that's where all of us come into the mix. We all have to be vigilant and working together to try to hold people accountable for the sign-in system. And the last thing I heard you mention was about the video. It's important that you know that the police department has live video feeds of our school buildings at all times. So 911 is watching our buildings. I am watching the buildings. Administrators have the ability to see any camera in the system at any given time. The buildings are labeled, the cameras are labeled, so honestly, a law enforcement officer could pull on campus in their patrol car and see what's happening in the building without ever stepping foot out of their car. Captain, I'm sorry.
The sheriff's office has the same capability to be able to monitor those cameras. I can monitor them from my office. My lieutenant can monitor them. My supervisors can monitor them. So we are able to see live, real-time video from the schools. As far as the arming the teachers, teachers are there to educate the children. Do not put them in a spot. We feel that you should not put them in a situation where they have to decide to keep the child safe or to take a life. The SROs are trained. We're trained shoot, don't shoot. We train continually on that, and we train with our firearms to make sure that we don't shoot someone that should not be shot, that we shoot the bad actor and take care of that situation. It is just, I don't know what the decision will be finally, either with the legislature. I think, I agree with Dr. Looney. I think there will be some type of a bill come out to address that. But I believe here in Williamson County, I believe we're setting the standard, and I'm happy that we're doing that.
Captain, how would you even identify if teachers were, or if employees were allowed to have arms, and your agency was called into a hostile situation? How would you identify the hostile actor from a teacher if there's guns waving everywhere?
The SRO in the school would know probably who the teachers were that were armed. However, in an active killer situation, there's going to be responding agencies from all over the county, the sheriff's office responding, patrol people, criminal investigation people. Everybody will respond to that location. Those people coming into the school will have no idea who the bad guy is and who the good guy is. If there's somebody that's not in a uniform that's carrying a gun and pointing the gun at someone, they're going to be trained to take action against the threat. So there's no way to know that.
Dr. Looney, we have many folks who have questions. We'll start here. Would you stand up, please?
My question is, when public events are conducted, how the campus is secured? Because without checking anything, generally it will be allowed. So how that will be handled before from here?
Did you say a public event?
Maybe, open house, maybe any fair inside the campus. Generally, those, by seeing a kid and parents, they will allow generally. But I'm not sure who is entering. That's what my question.
Carol, if you would, we're getting the reverberation up here. It's a mix of sounds. We really can't tell what's being
Okay,
asked.
I'll try to restate. Let me say if I'm saying this correctly, and I'm loud. Sorry. He wants to know about public events held at our schools, open houses, sporting events, assemblies, choral presentations, that sort of thing. How are we handling security at that type of event?
Thank you. Yeah.
Go ahead and start.
I can tell you on the law enforcement side of it, we are trained to look for threats all the time, not just during the school day, but anytime there is anything after school, if there's a sporting event, we are trained to look for threats all the time. Could we miss something? Yes, we're all human, but we're trained to look for those threats and to address those threats as they come up.
And I'll add, and when we have large events, we have additional law enforcement present, but you need to know about two things that are changing that are going to be, I think Mike talked about it being inconvenient to you. And so you need to know this because this is coming to a school near you. First, for those elementaries and middle schools that have events after school where there traditionally has not been a law enforcement officer hired to be at the event, that's changing. We have directed our folks that moving forward, if there's going to be an event at a school, then the expectation is for the sponsor of that event to hire a law enforcement officer that's off duty to provide security there. Secondly, this is going to be the part that hurts the most. I have had conversations, particularly with elementary school principals, about programming during the school day. When we put on a play in the middle of the day and we allow hundreds of parents to come in, it's nearly impossible to provide security in the building. So you're not gonna see a prohibition about it, but you are gonna see more of a movement to those types of programs in the evenings and outside of school hours rather than during the school day so that we can enhance security. It's a travesty that we have to do that because we want the school to be part of the community, but there's no way to provide adequate security when you're letting hundreds of people in your building in the middle of a school day with 1,000 kids in it. So just know that that's one of the struggles that we're having, and you will see a slow tweaking of how we approach those programs during the day. That's not to say that we won't provide a Thanksgiving meal and grandma and grandpa can't come that day. But I will tell you, getting into the lunchroom is going to be a slower process than it has been before because we have all just welcomed you with open arms and say, just come on in, we're having Thanksgiving meal. Well, we're going to have to slow down long enough and say, well, we need to do our security check. And so there's not going to be skipping the security check process because we can't afford to do so anymore. But I want to reinforce something that's really relevant. Y'all aren't the problem. We love you. We want you in our schools. You're not the problem. We're having to tighten up because of bad actors. And oftentimes it's a former student or somebody with a mental health condition that has said something on social media or elsewhere that somebody could have avoided. To the gentleman's point a while ago, there is no security system that's perfect. What we have to do is to prevent them from getting to the schoolhouse. If they get to the schoolhouse, it's too late. Somebody's going to be hurt. It might be one person, it might be a death, it might be injury, but if they get there, it's too late. We have to prevent them from getting there, which means the intervention has to start before they get to the schoolhouse.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, let everybody know, I was a police officer in New York for 22 years. I just moved to Williamson County last year. And everything that you've heard from these people, dead on, they know what they're doing. Everything that I've heard today, I feel that my kids are so safe. In New York, I was paying close to $14,000 a year in taxes. About $6,000 to $8,000 was my school taxes, and there was not one police officer in any of the buildings. Here, there's a police officer in every building. The department I worked at, we had the DARE officers. We go into little elementary schools and talk about drugs and that kind of thing. But I feel so safe with all the answers that they've come up and what they've said, their plans. I feel so safe, and they're doing an excellent job. I just wanted to say that as a police officer of 22 years in New York. Thank you for what you're doing.
You ready? A question here, Dr. Looney?
Yes, I've heard some rumors about possibility of new drills addressing active shooters. And I'm just wondering if you can address that, if it's true, and what drills our kids will be exposed to.
Say that one more time. Rumors about active shooter
rumors
drills.
about, will we start active shooter drills?
Well, give me some detail. What are you asking about?
I've heard rumors from the training that kids might have drills where they hear gunshots through the hallway, or...
No.
Thank you.
No. We
Okay.
do lockdown drills that talk about the goals and objectives to make kids safe in the event of some sort of active violence in our campus. We're not doing full-scale drills with the students where gunshots are being fired and so forth. And I'll tell you this, we don't put smoke in the building to do a fire drill, and we don't break glass of the windows to do a tornado drill. I don't get the reason why we would fire weapons and simply terrify, in my opinion, children to prove the point that we just need to talk about the goals and objectives about locking down and getting safe. So I disagree with those types of drills wholeheartedly.
Rebecca, do you have someone?
Hi. I was wondering, we've talked about the training for the SROs and we've talked about the drills, but what about the training for the teachers? I've heard of ALICE training, and I wondered if that's the training mechanism that you guys employ or if you use something else, and how do you keep updated on the most current methods for that training?
Absolutely. So ALICE is one of many tools that you can use. There's Run, Hide, Fight. There's Avoid, Deny, Defend. ALICE is an acronym: Alert, Lock Down, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. They all mean the same thing. They're goals and objectives for people to use should they be confronted with acts of violence. ALICE is a great tool in the education environment because it lays out what the goals and objectives are. And I keep going back to those because they're very, very important. When you're in a stressful situation, you've got to focus on what you need to do right then to keep yourself and your students safe. And so, yes, we utilize the ALICE with our staff. We've gone across the entire district and trained our staff members on that and provide them with that. Their task was to go back to their workspaces and make sure that they had ways to accomplish those goals and objectives. If they didn't, work with their administrators and their SROs to mitigate through that. And we've brought plenty of resources to aid them in doing so. So to answer your question, ALICE is what we've chosen here for that purpose.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question here.
It's similar to that question. If you elaborate a little more. Recently, I attended an active shooter training class in Franklin, and that's where they talked about run, hide, fight. Run when you can, fight if you have to, or fight if you need to. Sorry, got that wrong. Hide if you need to, fight if you have to. Run, hide, fight. That seems contradictory to the shelter in place that our kids have done in the past. Can you elaborate on that and explain anything? Or is that something you've addressed when you've reviewed the procedures you have?
Yes, so shelter in place is not for acts of violence. Shelter in place is for tornadoes, for hazardous materials incidents, or crime that's outside the building, down the road. A bank gets robbed. We secure it up, we shelter in place, teachers keep teaching. What you're talking about, the Run, Hide, Fight, Avoid, Deny, Defend, or ALICE, is talking about The bad thing has entered the building. It's inside the walls of the building, and you've got 3 options. Lock down, make yourself safe, barricade, evacuate, leave completely away. Getting away is absolutely an option, okay? And then the last piece, that fight piece in that, or what we say is counter, means do something rather than nothing. Do something rather than nothing, not just standing there. Standing there is not going to serve you well at all.
Rebecca?
Hi, thank you so much for having this forum. I'm a paramedic, and so I realize that seconds count with lives. And I am very, very concerned about the coordination between the school district, the sheriff's department, and EMS, because I feel like there is a major gap between the time an active shooter starts until paramedics can get there to administer life-saving skills. So what is the school district doing to address that major issue? Thank you.
So yeah, there's a couple of things, and it's not just us. First, you got to know our nurses just participated in the Stop the Bleed program recently, and I think that's a fantastic program to bring that resource in. Throughout the county, fire departments and EMS throughout the county have been working with law enforcement partners to create what they call a rescue task force, to get paramedics like yourself into that school faster in what we'd call a mass casualty situation. And that effort's been going on for a couple of years now. We also have a multi-dispatch system here in Williamson County. If I'm not mistaken, you're wearing a Metro shirt, right? So you know what a multi-dispatch system is. When a call like this goes out, law enforcement is obviously going to be dispatched, but simultaneously, fire and rescue EMS is going to be dispatched as well. So I feel pretty confident that our county partners have come up with a pretty solid plan of introducing medical professionals into a scene like this as quickly as possible, as well as our nurses inside our buildings focused with training on stopping the bleeding, controlling bleeding. And I'll also add that I can't speak for every law enforcement agency. I certainly can speak for the Sheriff's Office and I believe Franklin Police Department and a few others. They have also trained all of their personnel on Stop the Bleed, whether it's through the TCC or some of the other trainings. So each of those individuals, as they enter, also has the capability to start providing some immediate medical care and bleeding control should a situation like that arise.
We have a question here.
First, thank you all for the efforts that you've made so far to keep our children safe and for caring enough to have a forum like this. I have 2 questions. One is that my daughter attends a school that is about at 124% capacity, I believe. So is it fair and reasonable that they have one school resource officer when other schools who are at much lower capacity, really under capacity, also have one? Isn't my child at greater risk?
Are you talking elementary or middle?
Elementary. My second question, and we came in late, so if you address this, feel free not to answer this question now, but what are we doing to enhance the safety of the physical building, both in new construction and in retrofitting old buildings, to ensure we can contain a shooter once they enter the building? So for example, enhancing my daughter's teacher's ability to barricade themselves in a room. I don't know what those measures would be, but bulletproof glass or doors that can't be shot, I don't know what those would be, but are we making those changes?
Thank you for your question. So I'll start, and then somebody else may want to chime in. Jason Golden is the Deputy Superintendent of Operations. He, along with his support staff members on the maintenance side and the construction side, along with Mr. Fletcher here, are doing a thorough analysis of all of our campuses to determine what capital improvements we have to make in order to provide a more secure environment. So that is part, and I have notified the board and the county commission that there will be a budget amendment forthcoming once we have hard numbers in place about how we do that. I will say we are doing the same thing with individual classrooms doors. I do not foresee a time where we harden all of our classroom doors that can withstand gunfire. It's really important to me. Well, let me back up a step. I want to be redundant and say we have to stop these events before they get to the schoolhouse. Otherwise, people are going to be harmed. Having said that, we want to find the balance, and where that balance is, I don't know, between providing a secure and safe environment and not overdoing it where students feel like they're in a prison or that they have to be fearful for their lives all the time. So we're trying to find that balance. We're going to do the logical things, such as improving the camera system, the access and egress, entry points into the building, going to a keyless system so that somebody that worked for the school district 10 years ago that made a copy of the key doesn't keep the key, that we can reprogram, kind of like when you go to a hotel and these days and you have a swipe card, something along that line. Readjusting specific corridors in buildings so we can confine certain areas. But realize we got 45 buildings, 48 or 47 next year, over 6 million square feet of school property, buildings, and it's really hard, and I'm not using this to criticize anybody, but it's really hard to get a budget passed, and it's even harder to get a budget passed with additional capital expenses. So I'll use this opportunity to kind of paint for you the financial picture that we're in this year. The school board last night approved the budget, the school board budget for this upcoming year. Well, what you may not know is when the school principals submitted their budget request and it kind of flows uphill from there, classroom teachers make their requests, the principals take those requests, build a budget, send it to the central office. It gets to the central office staff members add their elements to the budget. It finally gets to me. So when it got to me this year, when I looked at the expenditures that were needed to honor the requests that were made, and I looked at the revenue that's projected based on the tax dollars that were collected, we were $20+ million away. So it's just like if you make $50,000 a year and you have $70,000 a year of expenditures, that math doesn't work. And so I went back to my folks and said, okay, nice try, but we got to do better. And we went back and forth 3 times. We cut things out of the budget, such as additional social workers, psychologists, gifted teachers, psychometrists. I mean, we made some real cuts. Well, we reduced that gap to $10 million, but it's still $10 million. So to be frank with you, this is before I even asked for anything additional for security. We're $10 million away from having a budget. It's an election year for the county commission. What are the odds that they're going to increase taxes for schools? Probably 0. So we're going to be in this tug of war this year, absent a conversation about how do we increase all these other things. So I just want you to know that there are some real challenges living in a great community that we live in, but that's so physically conservative that we spend $700 less per pupil than the state average. So I don't know how we get there. As it relates to your first question was
about SRO numbers.
Oh, the number of SROs. So once again, the SROs are provided and funded by the Sheriff's Department. The sole reason we have SROs in our buildings right now was because Sandy Hook, and we all got together and said we got to do something, and hats off to the county commission, they said yes. This year they're adding SROs, but they're starting with going to the high schools, where the high schools that have more than 1,500 students are going to get a second SRO. I would never turn down additional SROs if the sheriff could put them in his budget and get approval of it. But it's kind of one of those things, we have all these different priorities. How do you get them all done? Captain Wainwright or Jason?
Dr. Looney, I want to add a tiny bit to that. I think I've said that more than once already tonight, but we are evaluating each of our older buildings for line of sight issues. Many of you have children in those 80s style buildings where you walk in, you have a main corridor where students are passing through during a lot of the day, and then the office is behind that, right? So we're looking at line of sight. We're going to make some recommendations for some capital improvements. If you've been to Fairview High School in the past 6 or 8 months, you can see an example of what we've done with that. We now have a second entrance, a glassed-in entrance that then goes into another front office where parents aren't passing through that mid-range so that they can actually go straight into an office and you're not immediately exposing the visitors to the student body as a whole. But it's going to take some work on the capital side. This is an aside, Dr. Looney, but I've been thinking we have so many questions here. I'm thinking maybe we need to at least give an email for the folks who aren't able to ask questions, an address so that they can write so that we can have a kind of an ongoing dialogue about this.
So you're volunteering?
Yes, sir. I'll volunteer. Mike.Looney at...
No, seriously, you can email me because it is 7:35. We're 35 minutes over the planned hour, and I do want to thank the Church of the City so much for giving us this space for free today. Isn't that awesome of them? Thank you so much, Church of the City. Darren Whitehead is the pastor here, and okay, thank you. Darren Whitehead is the pastor here, and thank you to Darren. We are going to post, this is Rebecca Hagan, who really runs the district. And so Rebecca has told me I have to put all the FAQs on the website, which I will do, Mrs. Hagan. We will continue to answer your questions. Drop email to me. We'll sort it to the right person, and then we'll have a FAQ document on our webpage that answers those questions. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I'll hang around for a few minutes to answer a couple additional questions. Be careful out there. If you see something, say something. Thank you.